What I wanted to talk about today is how to translate ambitions that we all as sustainability professionals have into real actions, how to build a true roadmap that's actionable and drives change. So I start, and throughout this presentation, I wanted to tell you two things about what drives me, or rather one thing that what drives me in this journey. And I know for those of you who maybe have visited or are from Latin America, this is the Perito Moreno. It's one of the most magnificent glaciers in the world. And I had the pleasure of really visiting it when I was still a student. And I'm sure each and every one of you, if you go back into your memory, you have one instant where nature has put you in true awe, inspiration, where you have really found remarkable beauty in the nature out there. And throughout this presentation, I want you to remember that image, whatever that may be for you, and how that drives not only our business decision, but us as people. Because what I want is the beauty, awe, and inspiration I receive to pass it on to my children. I want them to be able to visit the Perito Moreno one day and see it the way I saw it. And for sure, you have that thought and that inspiration in your mind. So please, when we talk about business decisions, remember, this is what we're deciding. Moments of inspiration, beauty, and awe. And if I do my job right today, you will walk away with three things. The first, with the conviction that going to net zero is possible and feasible. The second is one good idea that you want to execute when you get out of here. And if I'm really good today, you will have a third, which is you are going to come and ask me a question, either today or later at the booth. I feel preaching to the choir if I say that planetary health is patient health. I think that most of you probably already know the facts and the figures. 2 gigatons of CO2 emissions annually alone from the healthcare sector means that the healthcare sector is a small country and it cannot be unnoticed, right? Even if as healthcare professionals or professionals in the healthcare industry are claiming to provide more access to the people, we cannot be a dog chasing its tail, creating a problem or being part of a problem that we at the same time are trying to solve. And of course, there are 100 million people out there at risk to be in extreme poverty because of poor health due to climate. And not, for me, at least a surprising fact, 1 in 4 deaths today is attributed to preventable environmental causes. Heat stress is one of the leading causes of death amongst them. For me, this is really incredible. And what's more incredible is that our healthcare institutes, our hospitals, the frontline workers are already suffering these effects. There are significant disruptions in hospitals and healthcare, incredibly at the moments where patients need it the most, during a heat wave. When 120,000 people walked into a hospital in the emergency care in the US alone last year, just suffering from a heat. And at that time, exactly at the time when you need it, the hospital is not able to provide care because the air conditioning is not sufficient. IT is down, again, due to climate disruption. So for me, if we want to be part of the solution, we really need to act on climate. Now, the industry, like I said, I'm preaching to the choir, and the industry has had that awareness for a while now. So the question is the industry moving really into action? How are things moving forward? And on one hand, you have this increasing awareness, some regulatory requirements, some pressures that are coming. There is the carbon adjustment mechanism. There's the obligations, plastic waste, which my colleague just explained, the EU taxonomy, and so on. And of course, these are good drivers. But what is at the core? At the core of everything, for me, is this: that the consumers, the end people who are buying products and are making final decisions, are starting to want to make better choices. And more than 65% of them are saying that they would like to choose a sustainable option, even if they have to pay more. Please remember that this is in year 2025. where economic instability and political instability are top 2 of the high concerns, and climate change is top 3. This is really significant. Even in this time and age of political and macroeconomic instability, amongst the top 3 causes of concern is really climate change. And of course, I really want to drive this message home. There are cost risks associated to climate change. There is no question about it. People say, but you have to pay more, Sophia. But I'm going to have to invest, Sophia. Yes. But what's the alternative? Your energy prices are going to go up. Your insurance is going to go up if you're in a climate-prone area. Your carbon pricing is going to be shadowing your products. And finally, you're going to have business losses, again, because you're not answering the consumer end need. And indeed, some numbers are talking, and we have seen in 2025, this is public information, you can go out and reach and find it, more than 250, and another number is conservative, health and pharma companies have actually committed or set targets to the SPTI. This is in 2025. The acceleration is clear. You can start to see the hockey stick right here. So for me, indeed, there is an increasing awareness, not only of the regulatory compliance that sustainability is bringing, but also of the added value and the cost benefits to the business, and it's driving acceleration. So we started our journey with my colleagues a year ago, and we started providing webinars and information about LCA and product carbon footprints. And the question we got most of the times was really simple. But how do I start? Where do I begin to build a roadmap even, or a journey? I understand what you're telling me and what is a product carbon footprint, but how do I start putting my company on this journey and on the map? And if you have started your journey relatively recently, you probably have a good baseline, an understanding of what are your emissions as a company that drive your scope 1, the energy you consume at your operating facilities. What is your scope 2, the energy you purchase? And what is your scope 3, the carbon associated, the embedded emissions of the materials you purchase? And you have also calculated how much you're going to grow in the next 5 to 10 years. And you know what are the emissions that are going to come on top. And that's your total. And then you have your target. If you have committed to the SPTI and you have set that as your North Star, where to go, you have your target. That's the beginning of your journey. And when I looked at the slide, I thought I'm going to fall off a cliff. The total versus the target is an absolute incredible cliff that everybody's going to look down and say, I think it's not going to happen. But I'm here to tell you it can happen. It's possible. You see, of course, that the energy produced directly is round about 10 or 15% of your total. Another 10 or 50% of your total is the energy you purchase. And then you have your embedded emissions as a really big 20% contributing to your total. And you know all that, so you already know what you can do. You can immediately act on your scope 1 and 2. You can immediately act on your energy, and you know how much it's going to impact. And even though that's not your biggest lever, maybe, it starts making the cliff a little bit smaller. And so we start looking at this as well. We have our baseline. We know what is the contribution of our scope 1, 2, and 3. We know how much we can do on our own and how much we need to pull our suppliers and collaborators in. And we start thinking about our roadmap. And one part of it is the left, right? How much can I reduce? But another part that I want you to remember is what impact can we have in our consumers, in our sales, and also in the cost reduction of our operating sites. So yes, emissions reduction is one part of the equation to your roadmap, but the consumers and sales that you're going to impact and the cost reduction is another. And so now if we take those 3 criteria into account, we start building a much more complicated roadmap to the North Star, our SPTI target. And we put on the left, what can we control? What is in our direct control, our scope 1 and 2. And you see, we have an abundance of choices, of things we can act on. You have targets for your sites, relative governance, and also a culture, building a culture of continuous improvement. You can talk about energy efficiencies. You can talk about your air conditioning and utilities optimization, steam. How do I get it green? How do I move to heat? How do I reduce my waste? And on the scope 3, we talk about things like, first and foremost, our data infrastructure. How do we get data that's robust and actionable? How do we move to getting specific information on our products and their LCA? How do we get a product LCA? How do we engage our suppliers, which we know are a big part of that journey? How do we get primary data and so on? And that roadmap can get big. But when we start thinking about the emission reduction as one part of it and the impact we can have in the cost and sales, we start seeing some options showing up. We start seeing that energy efficiency is going to reduce our emissions, but also is going to have a direct impact on our bottom line in our cost. And so we start putting that on the map, relatively high priority to reduce our cost. We also know renewable electricity is going to reduce our emissions significantly. Is it going to drop it to zero? Is it going to reach our ambition? Maybe not, but it's something I can do immediately. So it starts popping on the map at a high priority. And then we talk about product LCAs. Yes, getting our suppliers to come to us in our journey and getting the right data is absolutely important, but proving the benefit at the product level has an immediate customer impact. So that starts popping up again on our journey. And of course, one of the things we start looking at is also things that may seem less important in emissions, but are extremely impactful to our customers and their customers, such as a switch to green logistics. Maybe in total emissions, it's not the biggest lever, but the impact it can have is pretty obvious. It's visible. It's a great first step. So it starts popping on our roadmap. And so with this, you can see that there are lots of choices. We also wanted to make sure that we enable our organization to come with even more. So our roadmap is not static. The roadmap gets renewed and refreshed every year. More ideas come into play, and we go back to saying, again, what is the emission reduction, but also what's the cost reduction it's going to give me, and what's the impact it can have to my customers. And it go back to a journey of continuous improvement and refreshment. And one of the things that we found extremely important is this. We started measuring really the product carbon footprint at our capsule level. We're a capsule manufacturer, that's our product, that's what we provide out to the world. And we compared ourselves versus a non-decarbonized supplier, and the results were incredible. What you see on the left is the product carbon footprint emissions of a capsule, if it were to be taken from a non-decarbonized supplier, and on the right from somebody like Capsugel who has decarbonized. And you can see the impact, right? The scope 1 emission is the bottom bar. It's almost a fifth, right? Because when you've implemented energy reduction measures, when you've optimized the footprint of your sites, the scope 1 emissions, the energy you burn on the site level is very little. And that is showing. The waste that you have is very little, and that is showing. The scope 2, the renewable electricity, gets even less. If you have renewable electricity, your scope 2 gets even less. And then finally, the scope 3, and that was also a big surprise. If you are a decarbonized supplier operating in a relatively decarbonized country, your universe of suppliers is also relatively decarbonized, and that effect compounds along the value chain. So you start seeing the immediate effects, and this is one of the most impactful information we can give to our customers. What is the impact of all of our actions to the product you receive from us? And how can we prove to you that that product is significantly better? In summary, please start on the journey. Get in the journey and convince your organizations that it's possible to get on a net zero today. Avoid common roadblocks. Don't have vague targets. SBTI is a great, great North Star. Even if it's ambitious, it has a very clear numerical. Build your baseline emissions and do not ignore your scope 3, but also do not ignore the financial impact of the journey. Take it into account. build your business case just like you would build it with any other innovation that you're doing. Make sure that that you understand what is the cost of abatement. And of course, how can I unlock with all the actions I do, cost and low cost projects and prioritize low complexity technologies. And finally, consider your impact up and downstream. Unlocking your organization is critical. I cannot highlight that more. Unlocking the people in your organization to come with ideas and embark on this journey is one of the most critical steps. Prioritize progress before perfection, and of course, the customer impact. I think I've said that already 3 times, so for sure you guys will remember. Prioritize your customer impact. And with this, join us in our booth. Join us in this journey.